Good evening and welcome. I am Councillor Dennis Pennyworth, Chairman of the Western Area Planning Committee. The members of the committee joining me this evening are Councillors Phil Barnett, Hilary Cole, Carolyn Culver, Clive Hooker, Eric Pattenden and Tony Vickers, the Vice Chairman. The following officers are attending to advise and support the meeting. Mr. Simon Till, Team Leader of Western Area Planning, Mr. Scott Houston, the Planning Officer, Mrs. Sharon Armour, Legal Advisor, and Gordon Oliver, the Clerk. I'm also assisted by Stephen Chard as the Zoom host. Before we start proceedings, I'd like to explain, for the benefit of members of the public who may be watching, that tonight's meeting is being held both over Zoom and with councillors present, and COVID compliant here in the council chamber. I can confirm that those present in the chamber are sitting socially distanced and are thus permitted to remove their face masks whilst seated. Parish Council representatives, supporters, objectors, and the applicant or agent making a presentation to the committee have been encouraged to do so remotely via Zoom. However, they can also choose to attend in person or remotely from within the Market Street building, for example, from the reception or the Roger Croft room, or from any public device in any location. The meeting is fully accessible both physically and remotely for any member of the public. The meeting is being live streamed on YouTube, so members of the public are able to follow proceedings. Please note there's a small delay between the live meeting and the stream session. Now to some housekeeping for those in the chamber. Please ensure that your mobile is on silent. We're not anticipating any fire alarm tests tonight, so if the fire alarm does sound, please leave the council chamber using the fire exits to the far right and convene in the Dolphin car park. Do members have any questions about the way in which this meeting will be conducted before we proceed? No, we're good. Okay, on to item number 1. Mr. Oliver, do we have any apologies for this evening, please?
Yes, Chairman. Councillors Adrian Abbs and Howard Wollaston have sent their apologies, and Councillors Eric Pattenden and Garth Simpson, oh no, actually just Councillor Eric Pattenden is attending as a substitute for Councillor Adrian Abbs.
Thank you very much. I'll add Councillor Simpson to the list of apologies. If we can note that, please, Councillor Simpson's indisposed. Members, do you have any observations of the minutes for the meeting held? We'll take these individually on the first of those, the 21st of July of 2021, please.
Chairman, yes, I do have a couple of comments. Firstly, on the first line, the word "not" I think is missing, because the minutes of the meeting on the 30th June were not available. They were in fact available at the subsequent meeting, which is where they were approved. So I think that's just an omission. And then at the bottom of page 15 on our agenda papers, I would like to change the word "would" to "could" in the last line, because what I was saying is that it would be possible to form a district committee without members of the executive or any Newbury Town Council. I couldn't really have said "would" because I wasn't in a position to be able to say who the membership would be. Do you get my meaning? I think it's an important distinction. I don't know whether Mrs. Armour agrees or recollects.
And I'm afraid I don't recollect exactly what was said, but the other members that were there, I don't know if they've got any comments on it.
I mean, I was careful to word it because the reason I said I think it would be possible to form a district committee, but I couldn't have said it would happen.
Councillor Cole?
I'm inclined to agree with Councillor Vickers. It was the sentiment rather than the actual fact.
Yeah, that's right.
It could be possible, not that it is or it should
or would. No.
I would agree with him on that.
Thank you, Councillor.
Chairman, I would also support that as well.
Councillor Barnett, thank you very much. Do we have any other amendments to those minutes? No? Does that find a proposer? Councillor Vickers, thank you, and a seconder. Councillor Cole, thank you very much. Can I take a show of hands for those present? That's carried. So I declare the minutes have been approved, and that's the minutes of the 21st of July. Moving on to I shall abstain from that. Actually, Mrs. Armour, I was an absentee. Moving on to the minutes of the 11th of August, 2021. Do we have any observations of those minutes, please? Fairly happy? I'll look then for a proposer, please. Councillor Vickers, thank you very much. Seconder, Councillor Barnett, thank you. Can I take a show of hands? Thank you very much indeed. I declare that those minutes, the minutes of the 11th of August 2021, have been approved. I will again abstain from that as I was also absent for that meeting.
Chairman, sorry, I'm also abstaining. Wasn't there for either meeting. Thank
Thank
you.
you, Councillor Packenden. Mrs. Armour, do you want to sign on the line or for those minutes?
What you mean, you signed them?
Would you like to sign?
Yes, please. Yeah, that'd be helpful.
They're signed. If I pass those on to you at the end of the meeting, if that's. Oh, Gordon, indeed. Thank you very much. Okay, moving on to item number 3, declarations of interest. Do any members wish to make a declaration of interest? No? Okay, we come to item number 4, which is our first and only application of the evening, which is 21/00596 House, Spindlewood, number 50, the High Street, Kintbury, Hungerford. Now, for the benefit of those watching, I'll briefly outline the format of each application. Officers will present the application to the committee. The drawings, site plans, and any deemed relevant material submitted on the planning file will be shown as part of that presentation, after which representations can be made from each of the following groups and in this order: parish, town council representatives, parish in this case, the objectors and supporters, applicant and or agent, and then finally ward member. Speakers will be invited to join the meeting in order, either by Zoom or in this room. Each speaker or group of speakers will have a maximum total of 5 minutes to make their case to the committee. Therefore, a group of speakers will need to agree a way of sharing their time allocation. It would be useful to do this now if you've not done so already. Following this, the committee members will then have the opportunity to ask questions of clarification of the speakers. Finally, committee members will have the opportunity to ask clarification of the officers. The committee will then debate the application and then vote on the decision. Mr. Houston, our planning officer, would you like to begin your presentation, please?
Thank you, Chairman. I'll just share my screen. There we go. Can everyone see that? Sorry, can you hear me? Can you hear me all right? Is that all right?
Yes.
Okay, good. Wonderful. Members, thank you, Chairman, first of all. Members, this evening we have a householder application for the erection of an outbuilding in the frontage of 50 High Street, Kintbury, the dwelling also known as Spindlewood, for the purposes of a, quote, a storage area, a kennel and a small home office. Dimensions 6.096 metres in length 2.44 metres in width and of a maximum height 2.26 metres. Your officer's recommendation is for approval, and this application was called to committee by the ward member to discuss concerns regarding the appearance of the building and impact upon the conservation area that the proposal sits within. No representations were received from the public in favour nor against this proposal. Objection has been raised by the parish. Members, the application site is located within the defined settlement boundary of Kintbury, where there's a presumption in favour of sustainable new residential development, which can extend to appropriately located and designed outbuildings within existing sites, in this case determined to be of an incidental usage to the enjoyment of the dwelling. This house was built as an infill in the late 1950s and forms a transition between two markedly different characters on the high street. To the east, two traditionally located houses built in the early 2000s, and to the west, the substantial grounds of Dove House. The front space that exists in this site has been assessed as proportionally large for the area, and this particular relationship has not been identified elsewhere in the near locality. It is considered by officers that the proposed form is unassuming and appropriate for the secondary usage and is suitably subservient in size and height to the dwelling, which has been driven by a consideration of ensuring a low profile judged to be important here. This is because the lay of the land within the site is such that, sorry, I've lost my place there. Lay of the land in this site is such that the proposal is on a higher elevation as compared to the street, which should be demonstrated by these photos here. Though in theory this could result in a prominent position, substantial screening is offered by an open board fence with a substantial hedge in front of it of a mature mixed species. The fence behind this is 1.83 metres in height, and the hedge sits upon a grassy bank and this is approximately 2.5 to 3 metres in height. And the proposed height of the building on this side, i.e. along the behind the fence along the hedge, is 2.06 metres, which is some 0.13 metres taller than the existing fence. And the maximum height facing the dwelling will be taller than the fence by 0.33 metres. However, the building will be holistically shorter than the existing hedge and set away from it by approximately 1.2 metres. The trees officer has advised that this hedge will have foliage at all times of the year due to the composition of species, predominantly evergreen, and the trees officer has also recommended an informative to assist in the protection of this hedge during construction. The conservation officer has confirmed that the presence of this hedge with its mixed species has tipped the balance in favour of the proposal, such that they did not disagree with the conclusions reached by the officer over the placement and appearance of the building. And members will see in the update sheet that this assessment has been confirmed with a recommendation to retain the choice of colour as currently specified. On the basis of the advice of conservation, sorry, I'm just going to switch that back to a more helpful shot. Apologies. On the basis of the advice of conservation, it was felt that the degree of screening afforded is significant enough to greatly limit the potential harms to the conservation area. The balance of evidence suggests the retention of this hedge, and should anything happen to it, the impact of the proposal is felt to remain mitigated due to the screening afforded by the existing fence and the location on a higher elevation. Members, your officer's recommendation remains for approval. Thank you, Chairman. And just to finish, just a couple of extra pictures that were queried during the site visit. This is the Google Street View, June 2009. This was a picture I took during my previous application on the site. And this was a picture that was discussed in the chairman's briefing yesterday of 63 High Street. Thank you, Chairman. I will stop sharing my screen now.
Thank you, Mr. Houston.
Just
Highways, we don't have any presentation from highways as far as I'm aware. we move them on to speakers on the application. Can I ask Mr. Chard, please, to invite Sophie Meany, the applicant, into the meeting, please?
Chairman, to confirm, the applicant is in the meeting room.
We have no representations from the parish objectives.
Thank you, Councillor Cole. Councillor Cole, thank you very much. I'll just run down that. We have no one from the parish, no objectors registered to speak, and equally no supporters. Thank you, Councillor Cole, for that. So moving on to the applicant, Sophie Meany. I believe you're in the room and you have your video turned on. Good evening to you.
Good evening.
And thank you for joining us. As you know, you have 5 minutes to make your presentation. After 4 minutes, I'll give you notice, should you require it. And then with 10 seconds to go, I will say in conclusion, and then ask you to stop. When you're ready, we'll start.
Thank you. I'm not sure I will use the 5 minutes. I think it's been very comprehensively covered by Scott. I really appreciate the effort everyone's gone to in researching it so thoroughly. The plot is a funny one. There's very little by way of back garden, mainly space at the front garden. Would have liked to have put the shed in the background, and as most people would, but unfortunately that's not really possible here. So we have tried hard to minimise the impact and really don't believe that it will have any significant, it won't be visible at all really to anybody passing by. Try to keep it small but still practical. But mainly here and available to answer any questions if there are any sort of forthcoming. But I think the view of it will be very, very slim through the tiny slats in the fence, and I hope it shouldn't impact the local area anyway.
Okay, if that's your submission, you've done it in 1 minute, which is a record, I think, well, certainly for me anyway. Members, do you have any questions for Ms. Meany?
Chairman, I don't know whether I'm allowed to ask a question because it was such a brief presentation. There weren't many hooks to hang a question on. It's not in. It's a matter that's not in the officer's report either, although it has been raised, and it's something that's very much on my mind, and that is the surface water drainage off the structure. I'm wondering if I can ask a question on that issue, because I might be asking for a condition on this, depending on what the answer is.
Thank you, Councillor Vickers. I will go to Mr. Houston, or if you'd rather, Mr. Till.
Well, I don't know whether this is a legal question or what, if I'm allowed to ask a question that isn't arising from the presentation by the applicant.
It was a very short presentation.
Do you want to ask the question? And if the applicant can answer it quickly.
I think it's a very quick question. Is there any drainage accompanying your structure? You're putting a building up, which on the drawings in our pack looks like just a shed, but normally a building would need to be drained to a soakaway or something like that. Is that covered?
So, I mean, it is just a shed.
Right. Okay. Thank you. Simple answer.
That covers it, Councillor Vickers? Okay, thank you very much. Councillor Barnett.
Through you, Chairman, and again, correct me if I'm perhaps straying a little bit in another direction. Question for you, Mrs. Meany. Obviously, you're looking for a small home office. Is this a long-term position? Are you looking for it, or is this a temporary operation?
I mean, I'm working from home for the foreseeable future, as does my husband. So for as long as we can currently foresee, it would be useful to have a separate working space.
I'm not sure we can actually put a time limit on that, Councillor Barnett. Councillor Culver.
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you for attending this evening, Mrs. Meany. Just one question about the kennels. Could you elaborate for us how many dogs you'd be expecting to put in there and what times of day and so on? Because I'm just a bit concerned about what noise that might generate for the neighbours. Thank you.
Very, very reasonable question. We've only got one dog, and it's literally just for times when we come back from very muddy walks so that he can have his food in there and dry off before we bring him inside, but he wouldn't be regularly in there for long periods of time. Literally just might save my husband getting muddy paw prints over the the tile floor, that's all.
I can confirm that members who were at the site visit met the dog very briefly, and it was very well behaved.
Apologies for that.
Councillor Hooker.
Thank you, Chairman. Good evening, Mrs. Meany, and thank you for coming along tonight, and well done on your presentation. It's very difficult, I know. The vote of contention seems to be really one of colour. The parish council's kicked up. I didn't think I got too much on the actual shed itself. It just seemed to be the colour. What's your views on this with regards to whether the committee consider changing the colour? We did discuss it briefly at the site meeting. So for the members of the committee who weren't there, it might just be interesting for you just to reiterate your feelings on that.
I think what my husband suggested at the time the question was raised, I think we'd be very comfortable painting the back of it green. So I think that's the bit that would be visible partially through the slats from the road view. I think from you'll have seen from that picture that was actually the house view, all of the fencing is painted black. So I think for it to be painted, the view from the house side, for it to be green would really make it stand out. The black will make it blend in. But I think we'd be really comfortable painting the back of it dark green. And I believe that would then probably suit the needs from both parties. Green to blend in with the foliage when you look at it from the road, and then black for the two sides and the frontage to blend in with the fencing around it when you look at it from the house.
Thank you, that's very useful.
Thank you very much. Councillor Paddington.
Thank you, Chairman. Mrs. Meany, will the shed have sort of partition walls within it to separate the three different usages of that you're planning on using the building for? And if so, what sort of roughly what proportions would each of those different uses occupy?
It's broadly a quarter for the kennel, a quarter for the storage, and half for the office space.
Does that conclude your question, Councillor?
Thank you.
Councillors, any further questions of Ms. Minnie? No, I think we're done here. Thank you very much indeed for coming this evening and fielding the questions. And if I could ask Mr. Chard, please, to escort Ms. Minnie back into the waiting room. Thank you very much. Now moving on to the ward member, James Cole. Councillor Cole, you know the story. There's no point my telling you how long you've got and the rules of engagement. Tell me when you're ready, and your 5 minutes will start. We'll start then.
Thank you, Chairman. You're quite right. I've done it before. I called this in both at the request of Kempley Parish Council and because as heritage champion, I got the point that large lumps of black do not suit well in the street scene in Kempley Conservation Area as far as other residents are concerned. From the parish's point of view, it does not wish to see a shed on the road in this conservation area. It takes the view that this sets a precedent for other houses in the conservation area. The parish does not accept that the colour is in any way acceptable in their conservation area. For me, I would suggest to the committee that if you buy in a conservation area, there has to be some acceptance of fitting into the existing scene. We saw at the site visit, in a sense, the large lump of black's already there in the form of the fence. I imagine our planning officers have already permitted this. However, outside the property, we looked up at a black fence that a member of the committee pointed out was too high, more than the normally permitted 2 meters. I think we all assumed it belonged to the next door property. I certainly did. I'm advised rather firmly that it belongs to this house that we're talking about, number 50. Has that fence been given planning permission? I've read the update sheet. I note our conservation officer and planning officers think the black's appropriate. They specifically state there are other examples of black timber cladding within the High Street Conservation Area, including at Sycamore Farm and Osmington House, approximately 70 metres northwest of the application site. Well, I asked a parish council member involved in the conservation area reassessment programme that's now underway to go and have a look on my behalf this afternoon. I report his information. As far as the view onto the road is concerned, Osmington House has a hedge and a flint wall. It is entirely in keeping with Kintbury Conservation Area. It does not have a large splodge of black. What is now called Sycamore Farmhouse has no black. The ex-farm buildings next door, as you've seen in one of the pictures, do have a small amount of black, traditional for cladding on farm buildings, described to me as 25 to 30% of the frontage and set back off the road. Looking at the picture, that's about right. This is not a major expanse of black. There is a fence. It looks to me in that picture and on Google Maps that it's brown. Other houses in Kintbury Conservation Area have hedges and brick or flint walls. The black used in bulk here on number 50 is entirely out of keeping with this conservation area. So at the site visit, I also didn't realise that that very high fence was part of this property. I do get entirely that the hedge helps, much of the foliage will survive the winter. The fence actually as the backup. Probably is the fence is the problem. I do think the drainage question that Councillor Vickers raised should be conditioned in some way if this is to be approved. It's actually been raised to me today by someone else who's interested in this particular application. Nevertheless, if the owners want to keep their outlook from their front door black, I don't have a problem with that. I do suggest, however, the committee should accept the parish view in respect of their conservation area, condition that the sides and the section of this building facing the road be done in a medium to darker green, which have the effect of breaking up the black colour block a little. The existing fence proves not to have planning permission to that height. I suggest it be replaced with something conditioned to be more in keeping with the conservation area and repainted more appropriately. Thank you, Chairman.
Councillor Cole, thank you very much. And the consummate pro, well within your time as I knew you would be. Members, any questions of Councillor Cole? Councillor Cole.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Councillor Cole. You mentioned the parish council. Are you speaking on behalf of the parish council this evening? Because there is no parish council representation here. Are you a member of Kintbury Parish Council as well?
Not. I don't live in Kintbury.
Right, okay, thank you.
But I do speak to them. I quite regularly attend them. And I deliberately spoke to the member who is involved in running the reassessment of the conservation area, which, as you know, given that it's one of my interests, I'm well aware of what is going on. I am a heritage champion for West Berkshire.
I'm sorry, I cut you off there, Councillor Cole. Can you repeat that, please?
My last bit was that I am, after all, the heritage champion for West Berkshire.
And proudly so, I know. Councillor Vickers.
Thank you, Chairman. And thank you. Thank you, Councillor Cole.
You've unmuted yourself on your Zoom. Yeah. You had on mine. It now seems to be back on, but that seemed to be what the issue was.
We go. Let's try that. Yes. Thank you, Councillor Cole, for mentioning the point I made. And if I can pursue that, because it was probably the same person that lobbied me today about this issue that lobbied you. And I didn't note when I was on a site visit, which I did on my own because I couldn't attend the formal one, didn't notice the relative level of the proposed building compared with the rest of the property. Can you remind me or tell the committee rather that is it the highest point in the property? Does it drain away from the road or is it draining towards the road?
That's intended to be sited on what is a now flattened area that from memory is set a little bit up above the road. It would certainly make sense to have some proper drainage conditions. I didn't think that it was an issue more than just simply ensuring that the drainage is done properly.
Right.
Yes, I suspect that very probably was the same person that approached you that approached me.
Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Vickers. Members, any further questions of Councillor Cole? Councillor Cole, thank you very much, and you're free to leave. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you.
Okay, members, moving on. We can now go to our officers and put questions to those. Do I have someone to kick off questions of officers? Councillor Vickers.
Yes, my question is on this drainage issue. Isn't it normal, even for a house application, where you're actually adding to the footprint of built property buildings on the property, that you have a condition relating to drainage? No, it wasn't the issue in this particular application, but shouldn't that be a normal condition? Is the question I put to officers.
Councillor Vickers, that's a question to our presenting officer, or
to either Mr. Till or the case officer.
Which of you gentlemen would like to pick that up?
Thank you, Chairman. I'll answer that. The usual situation for small-scale developments is that the building regulations actually take care of most drainage requirements. In this particular case, I would expect that to be the case. In terms of a building this scale, we would ordinarily be dealing with permitted development requirements, but we're in a conservation area and it's to the front of the property. So in this very particular case, permitted development doesn't apply, but under most circumstances, that issue would be addressed through the building regulations. Should members feel that a drainage condition was necessary, then I certainly am prepared to recommend such if that comes out in the debate. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Till. Councillor Culver.
Thank you, Chairman. I'm just interested in knowing if there's any precedent for us giving permission for such developments in front gardens in a conservation area.
Councillor Culver.
Thank you, Chairman. I think it's probably a case that I should answer that. Councillor Culver, I can't comment on any district-wide survey of similar forms of development, but in the first instance, what I would say is that we are directed to consider each application on its own merits. Now, there are many cases where we might consider an outbuilding in front of a dwelling unacceptable, both in and out of conservation areas. In fact, we have guidance on design that generally directs people to avoid it. In this particular case, an assessment of the material considerations that constitute the constraints of the site has been made by both the case officer and the conservation officer. And neither is of the view that the building proposed would result in undue visual interference in the character and appearance of the area or deterioration of the conservation area. So making that individual assessment of the application on a case-by-case basis, as we're duty-bound to do, we feel that in this particular case, what is proposed is acceptable. It may well be the case that on other sites it would not be. Thank you, Chairman.
Mr. Saul, Councillor Culver. Any further questions or clarification from our officers? No, thank you very much. Okay, we're going to move this on then to the debate. Councillor Hooker, thank you very much. You can start proceeding.
Thank you, Chairman. Chairman, before I say anything, I reiterate Councillor Hilary Cole's statement. I'm very disappointed that the Parish Council haven't turned up this evening to give their 5 pennyworth on this. This application has come to committee because of the parish council's objection. With regard to my own view, I'm quite relaxed about this application, both in its position and its colour, having been to the site meeting. I'm generally in agreement with the planning officer on this one. A lot has been made, or quite a bit has been made, both at the site meeting and in tonight's meeting with regard to the fence height. That's something we're not really considering this evening. And if it's deemed that this should be looked at and is necessary, then my view is it should be considered at another time and not something that we ought to be influence our decisions tonight. I agree with Councillor Vickers, thank you. With regards to soakaways and the water treatment. However, I equally agree with Councillor Mr. Till that this is a building regs issue, and should we need to put a condition on there, it's nothing more than a drain pipe down into a soakaway. It's no great big deal. It's not going anywhere. Anything too serious or a financial commitment. So that's my views on this application. And as I said, it had been anywhere else, it had been under permitted development, and it would have been allowed. I appreciate it is a conservation area, AONB, and that's my views on it, Chairman.
Councillor Hooker, Councillor Barnett.
Chairman, members, I also share Councillor Hooker's concern that what might be deemed to a reasonably small application, is taken a lot of effort to come to committee, and obviously it's taken time and it's a cost to the authority. But having said that, we are where we are, and we need to discuss it. I've got very little concern regarding the application, except obviously I did touch on something early on, which probably was straying in other areas. But I was also wondering what sort of services might be expected other than electric to the particular site, because obviously that has some bearing in regarding long term. Furthermore, comments have been made by couple of members' relationship to drainage. There's obviously a hard standing concrete base already been prepared for the building, but the whole of the front garden and the driveway is basically hardcore or free draining materials. So whether we need to look at a condition of gutters and soakaways to the building, I'm not too certain, but otherwise, I've got very little concern regarding putting this proposal forward. So I don't know whether we are looking for a formal proposal.
I've got a few more hands.
Okay,
Councillor
I'll hold back then, Chairman.
So if we'll go first then to Councillor Cole.
Thank you, Chairman. I'm going to just touch on the colour of the building. A lot of emphasis is being put on the colour of the building, lumps of black, to quote Councillor James Cole. However, looking at the photographs, the hedge is obscuring the building. And therefore, I'm struggling to see what the issue is with regard to the colour of it. These things are subjective. A former colleague on West Berkshire Council, who is a garden designer, has always said that something painted green is worse because it doesn't blend in with the foliage, whereas black is a recessive colour. And I therefore have no issue at all with the colour of this, and I don't think there should be any condition put on it to request the applicant to paint the back of it green. It's completely pointless. And I too also, as Councillor Hooker has said, take a bit of a dim view of this being called into committee because of a parish council objection, and they haven't got the given us a courtesy of attending this evening. I think it's pretty poor show. And as Councillor Barnett says, we're all sitting here at great cost of officer time. I don't begrudge my time, but I do think officers have been put to an unnecessary effort for this very small application. Thank you. And I will be supporting officer recommendation when the proposal is made. Thank you, Chairman.
Councillor Cole. Councillor Vickers.
Thank you, Chairman. I see no other hands up, so I might end my little half a minute's worth by making a proposal. And I agree with what everybody said. I was quite satisfied with the officer's answer to my question about drainage, but I think it is an increasingly important issue and it deserves a mention, particularly if anybody has expressed concern about it. I think we should be sure that the hedge will be preserved and protected. And my only thought is there a possibility of conditioning that should the hedge get diseased, it will be reinstated? Because I think as soon as I arrived on site, I realized that this is not a typical shed in a front garden, which in this position would certainly be objected to. It's really absolutely fine because there is a very robust hedge and a fence behind it. So provided I can have an assurance from officers that, because it's not mentioned in the tree officer's comments, and I wouldn't have thought anything in that hedge is big enough. Is it?
We do have, yes. Thank
The
you, Councillor
update sheet talks about
Part 2 of
green
the
paint,
update sheet,
doesn't it?
Councillor Vickers.
Oh, hedge alongside the, right.
Shall I just give you a moment to digest that? And,
Yeah, I thought I'd read it. Although the applicant might not wish to remove it, if it should die or if it should cease to be there for any reason, would it be something that could be conditioned that the hedge could be reinstated? Because I think without a hedge, a fence so high up and prominent in that conservation area would be objectionable. That's all.
Thank you, Councillor Vickers. Mr. Till, if I can turn to you as a condition, is there anything we can do?
Thank you, Chairman. I think my advice would be in this case that, first of all, there is the protection from deliberate destruction within the conservation area without an approval having been granted for such to take place. My concern in terms of conditioning retention of this hedge is, first of all, it isn't considered reasonable in planning terms to seek retention of a hedge in perpetuity. The planning case law on that is very well established, and I've dealt with instances of archaic conditions where preservation of hedge in perpetuity was sought that needed to be expunged. They didn't live up to the test of conditions. It is possible to apply a condition that seeks the standard requirement for the hedge alongside the high street on the boundary of the house to be retained for a period of 5 years, and any shrubs that die or become diseased to be replaced in line with what might usually be applied as a landscaping condition. So I would suggest if members are seeking a condition along those lines, that would be my recommended wording.
Well, thank you for that, Mr. Till. And with that advice, I would like to propose that we do accept officer's recommendation with a condition such as has been advised.
Thank you, Councillor Vickers. Before I put that, Councillor Hooker, please.
Thank you, Chairman. I'll just come back to the point of colour. There was suggestion that it be painted green. I'm pleased that nobody's put a condition on there. It ought to be. I think with the back and sides painting green and the front painted black would look more out of keeping than if the whole building is black. And so everybody's happy. I think we keep with the colour of black and be done with it. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Hooker. Now we have a proposer. Do I find a seconder?
I'm quite happy to second that.
Thank you, Councillor Hooker. Okay, well, the recommendation is that the Service Director of Development and Regulation grant permission. Proposal that we have, a proposal by Councillor Vickers, seconded by Councillor Hooker. I'll take a show of hands, please, councillors. And that is unanimous. The proposal to approve permission has been agreed. Well, that was short and sweet. Thank you, everyone. A little bit of housekeeping now. If I can just, in fact, before the meeting closes, I'd like to thank Councillor Vickers publicly, and I'd like that minuted for his stalwart work in filling the chair admirably for the last few months while I've been out of the country. Members, I'd like you to remember to please to clear and disinfect your own desk before leaving, and wear a face covering while you move around the room. And thank you very much. And I declare the meeting closed.